We hear it was obliteration. It was a virtual obliteration.
And given the 30,000 pounds of explosives and capability of those munitions, it was devastation underneath Fordo. And the amount of munitions, 6 per location, any assessment that tells you it was something otherwise is speculating with other motives.
Well, that was President Trump claiming in the aftermath of attacking the Fordo nuclear site, along with 2 others, a couple of actually about almost a month ago now. We found out subsequently maybe it wasn't quite as obliterated as he may think, but so far the administration has continued on. Now, you may notice in that clip there toward the end, Secretary Hegseth talked about how these big 30,000 pound penetrating bombs that we dropped obviously caused a lot of damage. And as you may also recall, if you've been watching our show, that Professor, I almost said Senator Ted Postol, you should be, but Professor Ted Postol, who's back with us again today live, talked about how incredibly difficult it would be and how unlikely it would be for that to happen before it happened. And then now subsequently, we have these a number of different claims here. And we're going to look today because Ted has some pretty breaking information here that you haven't seen anywhere else, either on even some of our other friendly YouTube sites or on the mainstream media, is that he's going to contend here today that Iran has their capacity to make bombs and maybe even closer than anybody thinks. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Ted, if you can. First of all, you had some caveats about, you haven't actually been to the ground in Fordo, so if you can just put that out. But because of the evidence that you have a high confidence that what you're going to say is correct.
Well, if I were heading an intelligence assessment, and I have the background to do it. At least I don't have the political flexibility to do it maybe these days, but I do have the technical skills to do it. If you look at the situation in Iran and you ask the question, what would you best expect given what you know about their program, you would conclude essentially without doubt, you would call it a high confidence conclusion, but it really is with very little doubt that they now, at this moment, have the capacity to produce really 10 atomic weapons. Actually, I haven't even an estimate of the number. What I decided to do, given all the smoke and mirrors that has been used by the administration, and unfortunately the lack of any kind of journalistic attempts to really look into details, I decided to put together a briefing where I describe all of the technical capabilities that Iran must have in order to build an atomic weapon. Now, all of these capabilities are they already exist in Iran. That's one of the points of the briefing. Incidentally, those of your audience who want a copy of the briefing, please feel free to write me an email. Just call it Iran atomic bomb in the heading. Please be careful about the heading because I'm dyslexic and I have trouble scanning my emails. So make sure your subject says Iran atomic bomb, and I'll be happy to send you the full Monty here. And it's a lot of detail. I won't go through the detail here, but I'll give you a sense of how these conclusions were reached and what the evidence is.
And what I'd like to do, Ted, is just kind of as a bottom line up front, and you'll get into the detail, or at least some measure of detail here in this a minute, is that it could be from the time a decision is made, it could be between 5 and 6 weeks, according to what I read in your briefing here a second ago. Or less, but and we'll get to that in a second. But to set the stage, that's what your assessment has come down to. Here is from Sean Parnell on July the 3rd, telling you what the government official position is.
our assessment of the battle damage around Fordo, Nantes, and Isfahan remains unchanged. I mean, we believe, and certainly all of the intelligence that we've seen have led us to believe that those facilities especially have been completely obliterated. And the fact that we have degraded their program by 1 to 2 years, at least intel assessments inside the department assess that, and I think their intelligence shares that conclusion.
Current assessments by this department think it's been degraded or delayed by 1 to 2 years? I
think we're thinking probably closer to 2 years, like degraded their program by 2 years. But what we've seen almost, in fact, just universally among our allies, was them congratulating the United States, the President and the Secretary of Defense on that bold operation. And the idea that American action in Iran has set the conditions for global stability.
Global stability.
Global stability.
And
well,
probably closer to 2 years, he says. What say you?
Well, if he's defined that the damage that was done to these facilities near the surface, Fordo, I don't know what he's talking about. He's just blowing smoke. But to the Natanz facilities in Isfahan, they probably, it wouldn't surprise me if they've destroyed more stuff than they could rebuild in a long time. Even more than 2 years. That wouldn't surprise me. But that's not the definition of stopping the program. Stopping the program is stopping them from rapidly building an atomic bomb. So he's played this game of switch the objectives. If the objective is to stop them from rapidly building atomic bombs, then nothing has been done. In fact, we're worse off because we know, and I'll demonstrate this in a discussion, and I'll give people data if they want to get a copy of the briefing, that you could build a clandestine facility that would be not much larger than twice the size of a studio apartment. Like 60 meters, 600 square feet, 1,200 square feet would be enough to build a facility to produce the uranium. I'm not just talking about the enriched uranium hexafluoride gas from the centrifuges, but the uranium metal to produce atomic bombs. You need 1,200 feet of facility. You could build that anywhere.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I skimmed through your briefing before we got on the air here, but there's really two, obviously there's a lot of factors, but two really important factors to assess whether Iran has the capacity. And that's one, they have to already have some amount of 60% reprocessed material, nuclear material, and they have to have a certain kind of centrifuge. Is that correct?
Or a certain number of their advanced centrifuges, but those centrifuges, they're in the process of manufacturing them. They could have that many centrifuges, the number that I assuming a cascade of 174 centrifuges. I'll even show you the configuration of the cascade.
Yeah, and I definitely want to see that. So one of the first questions I have is whatever the number of them would be, let's just hypotheticals for a minute and say that miraculously the bombs literally destroyed every single one of the centrifuges of the type you're going to talk about here in a minute. How difficult would it be for Iran to build new ones? Well,
it would probably take months to build new ones.
But months, not years.
Unless the manufacturing facility was completely destroyed, which could be the case. I think the assumption that they don't have 174 of these centrifuges is very unlikely to be correct, because you have a production line, you have these things coming off the production line, you're storing them someplace before you're going to use them. They could easily have hundreds and hundreds of these centrifuges that they have not yet installed sitting somewhere. They would certainly, I just put I've been doing this for the audience. You put yourself in the position of the Iranians. You're not stupid. You have to assume that the Iranians are as stupid as these guys want you to believe when they give you these briefings. And the first thing you do is you say, we secure these centrifuges immediately. We just make sure they're in a place where you can't get at them. and then we deploy them as we see them. So it's very, very, very unlikely they don't have enough centrifuges for a Cascade, the size that they had in Fordo. It's also very unlikely that they destroyed the centrifuges at Fordo, but that's another discussion, and we can have that discussion. We've had part of it, but very, very unlikely that they destroyed everything, if anything.
So let me ask you, even before you get into the details of this, kind of as a follow-up from your last show, which you did, I guess, in the immediate aftermath of the attack. Have you, since that time, been able to assess or maybe obtain any additional evidence, whether it's satellite photos or anything else, to say whether or not, or to what degree, the bombing at Fordo may have been effective?
No, I have no information, and I doubt they do either. I mean, the statement was July 3. I mean, what is this guy talking about? At that point, the Iranians didn't know if there was any damage in Fordo. So what is this guy talking about? I mean, I have to tell you, as an American citizen, I am tremendously disturbed by this lying that goes on routinely by our leadership. And I'm also tremendously disturbed by the role of the intelligence community in allowing this lying, although it's hard for them to do much if their leadership lies about their findings. But it would be good if some members of Congress pressed them on this. And for example, this briefing I've just put together for your audience here could help any member of the Senate or the Congress who actually wants to know what specific questions to ask, because this shows you what they need to produce a bomb every month and a half.
Okay, so without any further ado, please jump in and explain how this could work.
Well, let me remind your audience of a fact that I discussed in one of the earlier discussions, which is how the uranium enrichment process, the character of the uranium enrichment process. Why don't we jump to slide 6, Gary, which I showed in the previous talk. If you want to get a sense of how the uranium enrichment process works, think of it as me having a frying pan where I have water with sugar mixed into it, and I want to extract the sugar from the water. So I have a stove, and I start heating the frying pan. In this case, we'll assume there's 10% sugar in the liquid. And each stage of the heating, let's say 10 minutes of heating, doesn't have to be that, but just I do an amount of work on the system. I put energy in and evaporated a certain amount of water. And each 10-minute period, I evaporate the same amount of water because I'm putting a certain amount of heat in, and the amount of evaporation that occurs is proportional to the heat I put in. So in the first step, I go from maybe 10% to if you look at the leftmost diagram with the most empty units with the red line on the bottom, I have 10% enriched water with sugar. Then in the next step, it becomes 11%. And the next step, it becomes 14% as I move to the right. If I move to the, let's look at the last two columns, and I have removed 80 units of water. It's the next column from the leftmost box. Then I have 50% enriched, sugar. And in the next unit, I remove the last 10% and 10% water, and I go to 100% enriched. So the curve below, the graph below, shows you how each step in the enrichment process brings me closer to a pure amount of sugar that's dry. Now, it turns out that there's a unit called separative work. We don't have to worry in detail what it is, but it's very close. It's similar, but not exactly what I just illustrated here. So if we go to slide 7, we have a quantitative curve here, a quantitative set of images here that says, okay, we start out with 1,300 kilograms of natural uranium. And using a separation device, I'll describe the separation device shortly. It's in this case, it's called a gas centrifuge, but there are other kinds of, but this is what the Iranians are using. In that 1,300 kilograms of natural uranium, there's about 2,500 kilograms of 90% enriched uranium. The problem is we have to get it out. We have to separate the uranium-238 from the uranium-235, which is the bomb material. So we need about 3,500 units, step units, to get to 3.5% enriched uranium. That's the next step. So notice, if you look at the very top, you get to get to an atomic bomb, the whole process requires about 5,500 separative work units, 5,500 steps, 10-minute steps on the frying pan. So if I go from 3.5% to 20% enriched, which is what the Iranians were doing for a long time, then I only need 1,500 more separative steps. The separative steps add up arithmetic-wise. You know, once I have a pan filled with 50% sugar, the next step is always the same, just as so these add up. They numerically add up. And so if I want to go from 60% enriched uranium to 90% enriched, all I need is 120 separative work units. So I need roughly 100 over 5,500 separative work units to do the final step, almost nothing. And this was not an accident. This was a brilliantly contrived strategy on the part of the Iranians to be extremely close to producing a nuclear weapon without producing it. Now, this has the advantage from a political, this is, you know, there's a technical fact. Now we need to think about the politics of it. This has the political utility of not being a nuclear weapon state. Remember, this was going on under the International Atomic Energy Agency observations. So unless they were cheating in some way, and there's a possibility of that, but all of the material was under oversight of the International Atomic Energy Agency, including the 408 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium hexafluoride, which could be used to produce 10 atomic bombs. 10, incidentally, low technology atomic bombs. Atomic bombs that don't have to be compressed in a complicated spherical implosion. So these are straightforward to build for a state that's already got the uranium. Very straightforward. The United States did not even test our first atomic bomb. We just dropped it on Hiroshima without a test. We were so sure it would work. So this is this is the level of technology that would be required in the Iranian bombs that they could the 10 bombs they could manufacture. So the question is, how do you enrich this 60 kilograms, 108 kilograms of uranium? Well, first of all, you have a device. Let's go to slide 12, please. You have a device that's called a gas centrifuge. This is a complicated looking device, and it is very complicated. If you look at the outer lining there with a light gray outer color, that's a casing. That's a case. And inside that case, you can see a red lined cylinder, and that's a rotating cylinder. So the outside doesn't rotate. It's a fixed casing. The inside is rotating. The inside is maybe, we know what its diameter is. It's about 8 inches, 20 centimeters. And the outside is about maybe 10 or 12 inches, 30 centimeters. And the rotation speed is fantastic. 70,000 rotations per minute. Now, the idea of having this fantastic rotation speed is you want to create a centripetal reaction, centrifugal forces that cause the gas inside the centrifuge to be pushed up against the wall of the centrifuge. And so you have a gravitational field that's maybe 300 or 500,000 times stronger than the Earth's gravitational field.
Wow.
Pushing this. So the gas, so this image which shows the gas rotating in a significant diameter of the centrifuge is misleading. It's just there so the diagram could be understandable. In fact, that gas is just pressed up against the wall. To give you a sense of how well balanced this centrifuge has to be, if I put a flea on the outer wall of the centrifuge, the centrifugal forces would cause the centrifuge to wobble with a lateral force of 1 pound.
Really?
Yeah. So it'll be it's 70,000 revolutions per minute. So you can imagine that when you construct this thing, you have to make sure that those walls are uniform in thickness, that there are no inhomogeneities in the wall. Plus,
So let me interrupt you for a second. Is that the reason why I heard, and I don't remember if it was the IAEA Director General Grossi or if it was just one of the commentators on, but they said if these things had been functioning when those bombs hit at Fordo, even if the thing didn't get down that far, the vibrations would have probably wrecked all of them. Is that probably accurate?
absolutely, absolutely. What they would have done and should have done and knew, and I'm sure they did, is they turned them off. They slowed them down. And and then you lock them in place. There's usually some kind of lock mechanism that prevents them from vibrating when they're in a stable state. So of course you would definitely you wouldn't sit there and let these things wobble around. So yeah. So I don't know what is Grossi suggesting, that these people are too dumb to. They knew there was an attack coming. I mean,
that was the implication that just the vibrations alone could have destroyed all of their centrifuges.
Well, it's a true statement, but it's
if they're running,
it's misleading. It's like the statement that they put this program behind a couple of years. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the low-tech centrifuges that are no longer playing a key role in the program, yeah, you may have done that. But so what? And on July 3rd, you certainly did not know about the high-tech part of the program. So I don't know where he gets his information. And again, I speak as an American citizen now. It infuriates me that an official of the U.S. government lies to the American public, because this is aimed at lying to the American public. No question about it. This is not.
Yep.
There's nothing to do with our adversary.
Because this is about unintimidated telling the truth. So that's why we're grateful to have you on.
Yeah. So one way to think of this extraordinarily complex object, it looks simple, but it's extraordinary tour de force from the point of view of mechanical engineering. It's and control, and it's absolutely an amazing piece of technology. You can think of it, if we look at slide 13, as an enrichment device. So if we look at the image at the bottom here of this, it's called a separating unit, among more technical people. There's an input where uranium hexafluoride gas, which is a mix of uranium-235 and uranium-238, is put into the centrifuge. The centrifuge is spinning at a fantastic speed through amazingly clever engineering. It separates some of the U-235, which is lighter, from U-238, which is heavier. And so there's an input of a mixture of U-235 and U-238, and there's an output of slightly enriched U-235 to U-238, very slightly enriched, and very slightly depleted from another mechanism. So if we go to slide 16, you can see one of these devices, these devices set up. These are probably, well, I'm not sure I know what kind of centrifuge they are. Notice at the top of these devices, there are 3 tubes coming out. Those are the tubes through which the uranium hexafluoride gas, one of them is a feed-in tube, and the other two tubes, one is for enriched uranium hexafluoride and the other for depleted uranium hexafluoride. But each one of these separation devices, these fantastically impressive mechanical devices, has to, it only does a very small amount of enrichment. So it has to be put in what's called a cascade. In the next slide, I show you an arrangement for the cascade. And let's go to the next slide thereafter, 18. And I'll try, I know this will be confusing without me having a pointer, but I'll give you what you need for the members of the audience who are seriously interested to figure it out on their own. If you look to the left side at the bottom, there's a small arrow and it's labeled feed. The feed in to it's in the middle, and this is the feed into the main cascade row. And notice that below the feed-in line on the main cascade row, there's a depleted uranium line coming out. Each of the centrifuges are putting out depleted uranium into that line. Notice that that line goes down to the next row. And that next row, that depleted line from the upper row, goes into the feed line of the bottom row, goes into the feed line. And below the feed line of the bottom row is another depleted line, and that goes out. And that's the depleted part of the uranium that's called tails or waste. Now, if we look at the upper part, let's again focus on the feed input, which is in the main cascade row. And if we look above the feed input, we see an enriched line coming out. Now that enriched line goes upward to the next row, and it goes into the feed of the next row. Now the next row has a feed that above it that's going into the feed of the next row above it, and so on. And the depleted line from that next row is going down back into the input of the row below it. And what we're doing is we're enriching and depleting and enriching and depleting, and we're just recirculating this stuff in what's called a cascade. Now, if we want to see what an actual cascade, which the cascade at Fordo, I actually am pretty proud. I couldn't find an exact statement of what it looked like, so I was actually able to deduce it. So you won't find this anywhere else, at least not to my knowledge. The next slide, 19, shows you the arrangement of the Fordo cascades with 174 centrifuges.
And do we know how do we know they have 174?
It's described by the International Atomic Energy Agency, and there's no debate about that.
Got it.
So we know what this cascade looks like, and we have a pretty good first guess of its enrichment capability. And we know the enrichment capability is somewhere around 900 to 1,000 separated work units, or SWUs. All right, we'll say it's 1,000 SWUs. That's probably a good guess. Now, if we look at the next slide, number 20, what I've done here is on the left is the original Cascade, Cascade I was using to illustrate. And then what I've done is taken the main feed row to the right and arranged it so the whole feed row is side by side rather than long. And the only reason I'm doing this in this diagram is to show you that it's straightforward. Remember, in the diagram we saw that was, let's just go back to it. If we look again at slide 16, you can see those lines coming out. And you see those lines can be bent and put where you want them to. So that means you can arrange the physical cascade, the physical arrangement of the piping in the cascade can be modified so the cascade is very efficiently arranged on the floor, so it doesn't take tremendous floor space. So if we go back to slide 20, and then go to slide 21, we can see that this is the 174 centrifuges can be arranged in a pattern 24 feet by 26 feet. That's about 624 square feet, so about 60 square meters. So if you had a studio apartment at one time in your life and it was a larger studio apartment, you could have had your own Cascade in it for enriching uranium. This is not a big thing. It's not a big object. It's one of the big issues with. And in slide 22, we see that these centrifuges are just arranged in a box-like pattern, but the actual physical arrangement of the piping is different from that. So the question next is, how much power do I need for this? Well, I took a guess of about 30 or 35 watts of power for a Cascade per separative work unit that the Cascade has. It's actually almost certainly much lower than that. For example, if you look at the West, we require about 5 watts of power per separative work unit for our Cascade, but the Cascades are very advanced. They're much more advanced than what the Iranians are able to build. But in any case, it's a ballpark estimate. And if you ask, well, that's like 30 or 40 kilowatts of power for 174 centrifuges, and you get 150 kilowatts of electric power out of your Prius engine. You can just take the Prius motor, make sure you take the electric generator with it because it's driving an electric motor. That's going to give you 150 kilowatts of power. So you can run, 3 or 4 of these Cascades with your Prius. With a motor scavenged from a Prius vehicle. I like the Prius. I own one. So.
That's good to know.
So I know something about them. So operating and hiding these centrifuges in a small volume laboratory type situation is not going to be a problem.
Okay, so let me ask you, that's physically, right? But there is these claims that one of the things that the IAEA could do, and in fact, one of the complaints of the Obama deal in 2015 was that they could have secretly had another site. But some were claiming that the IAEA sensing equipment or stuff that we had from aerial capabilities could detect if these things were operating somewhere else. What's the truth on that?
Well, we could not detect them from other. What we can do is look. We can do very, very careful forensic analysis of the materials that are being produced by Iran. So, for example, they have to produce about 1,200 kilograms of natural uranium hexafluoride. Natural meaning 0.071%, 0.0711% of uranium. Natural. Now, I don't remember the numbers, but they have to mine a tremendous amount of uranium ore in order to get that 1,200 kilograms of. So what you do is you start monitoring every level of their production,
I see.
and if there's agreement, if they're allowing the monitoring, then you have a bookkeeping problem, and it's probably correct. I would say it's, if the bookkeeping is done properly and the IAEA is in a position to do the counting, and as long as the Iranians are cooperating, and all the evidence was they were cooperating completely with the International Atomic Energy Agency, then you know what they were producing. You don't know from any kind of satellites or secret, this is in the fantasy of maybe this guy who was telling us that 2 years was lost in the program.
Sean Parnell. So there's no detection equipment that we have, whether from space-based or drone-based, that you can detect?
Well, you can look, for example, you can look for evidence of higher levels of enrichment. We found that. We found, for example, the IAEA found a sample, a small amount of 87.5% enriched uranium hexafluoride. It's not that there was a lot of it, but they found that, in parts per billion or million, you can detect this radioisotope of uranium, of uranium hexafluoride. So we do know that for sure that the Iranians were testing their centrifuges to see if they could go up to the 90% limit.
And how would that have been identified? How would they have detected it?
Because there's no other way that there would be 87.5%.
No, yeah. How did they know that there was 87.5? How did they detect that existed?
They probably took what's called a swab test in a facility, and they do this extraordinarily sensitive detection work. Looking for measuring the enrichment of what they got on the swab. They could have had picograms of the stuff. It could have been very, very small amounts.
But the bottom line is they have to be in the facility and take a physical test. You can't.
Yes, they were. They got it somewhere. They got it somewhere, right? So, but it's very hard to hide that you're up to something else.
Got it.
So that does indicate. I would, if you asked me, if I was your intelligence officer and you asked me, I said they have certainly checked to make sure that their understanding of what their centrifuges can do what they're expecting them to do. They're not enriching, because we have, a picogram is nothing, but they are experiment. In other words, they have tested their capabilities, and it makes sense they would. I mean, if I were playing this game that they're playing, I would want to make sure there's nothing I quite missed. In my enrichment capabilities. So it's clear that they have been hedging, and of course the whole idea is to hedge. You hedge by not having atomic weapons, so you don't provoke your buddies in Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Egypt to think of you as a nuclear weapon state and cause them to react. And you further, but you look pretty threatening to the Israelis, because you start fooling around with us, we're only a gnat's hair away from being an atomic weapon state to strike back. It's a very, very clever, deeply thought out policy, something we don't see at all in the West.
Yeah. Okay, so with given all that information is set up, how then can they move that to nuclear weapons capability and actually build a bomb in, as you say, between 5 and 6 weeks?
Okay, well, they have this uranium hexafluoride. It's we can take a look at this material. This is a gas. I mean, it's a solid most of the time. It's sort of at room temperature, it's a solid. looks like salt, crusty salt. I'll show you an image of some in the tube. And if you heat it up to maybe 170, 180 degrees Fahrenheit, 80 degrees Celsius, it evaporates. And so it's in the centrifuge as a gas. And you're using the gas to, you're separating the gas by having it pressed up against the wall. And the heavier U-238 is closer to the wall. The lighter U-235 is slightly less close. And you're sipping it out stage by stage. So now you have this uranium hexafluoride. Let me just show you. Slide 31 shows you what uranium hexafluoride looks like.
Looks like cotton candy.
What?
Looks like cotton candy.
Yeah. It's probably okay. Well, it's toxic, so
Yeah, I don't want to eat it, but
I wouldn't want to lick it. So you have to convert this to metal, because it turns out that the uranium hexafluoride is about 2/3 heavier than the uranium atom. So if you take uranium hexafluoride and you separate out the uranium atom, you will get 2/3 the weight, 6.66 the weight of uranium. So if you have 25 kilograms of uranium hexafluoride, which the IAEA is calling an atomic bomb, then 13 or 14 kilograms of uranium is associated, if you take the fluorine off it. So how do you do that? Well, some of the people, another obfuscate, in fact, this is what actually got me started putting together this briefing. Somebody made some claim about, well, they got to turn it into metal, big deal, it's a big deal. Well, nonsense. It's less of a problem than enriching with the centrifuges. Less of a problem. So I went out and I looked up a Russian paper on converting uranium hexafluoride to metal. Let's look at slide 33. All right, very nice diagram. The Russians usually don't do good graphics, but this one's a nice one. And we have a man standing here, so that gives us a sense of scale. And if you look at the leftmost part of this train, you see a red pipe and a green pipe on the left with hydrogen and fluorine coming in pipes. And the pipes make a sudden drop vertically, and then there's a chamber called a chemical reactor. You can see it's in red too, and it's going from left to right. The pipe center on the left side. That is a chemical converter to convert hydrogen, uranium hexafluoride to uranium tetrafluoride. So it's a two-step process we're going to go through here. So what we do now, uranium tetrafluoride, I'll show you a picture of it shortly. It's called green salt. It's a solid. And so out of this chemical separator through this pipe that's to the right of it is a gas. And let me tell you, it's nasty stuff. It's hydrogen fluoride, which is, etches glass. I mean, this is, not, it's chemically dealt with in industry all the time, but it's, maybe Gary can do it in his garage, but I wouldn't advise it to other people. And, but
you hear that, Gary? Don't do it.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah. And then it goes into a device called the cyclone generator, a separator. And a cyclone separator, let me just show you. I just want to, I know there's a lot of detail. I just want to show you that there's information for anybody who wants it that shows you this stuff is compact. It can be built by people who know what they're doing. And we certainly know that the Iranians know what they're doing. So if we look at slide 35, we see a diagram, a conceptual diagram of this this converter. But if we look at the next slide, slide 36, we actually see a converter that the Russians built. And what I've done here is labeled it for anybody who wants the slide, so if you look at the leftmost part of this exotic looking device, you'll see there's a hydrogen inlet and a fluorine inlet labeled. And the hydrogen and fluorine is mixed together and pressurized through a nozzle. And then there's this combustion chamber where the hydrogen and fluorine is burning. I mean, this is a complicated device. And the hydrogen and fluorine are then at high pressure and temperature forced through another set of inlets. And this is two rows of inlets, because in between these two rows of inlets, at the top you see an injection gas phase uranium hexafluoride and hydrogen. And at these high temperatures and pressures, what you get coming out to the right is a chemical reaction zone where you have atomic hydrogen, not molecular hydrogen, plus uranium hexafluoride, which then becomes uranium tetrafluoride, plus hydrogen fluoride. This is really nasty stuff. All right, so you have a mixture of solid particles and gas. Well, you don't want the gas. The gas is nasty stuff and it's waste. So if you go to slide 37, you pass it through a device which you saw in the original diagram. Let's go back to. Sorry, I just want to remind your audience. Let's go back to slide 33. You can see this funnel-shaped cyclone separator, and the cyclone separator is separating the particles of green salt from the hydrogen fluoride gas, which is venting out through the top of this separator and then into this ventilation shaft that's shown in the upper left corner. So you can vent to your neighbor if you don't like them, but make sure you're not in the path of this stuff because it's really nasty. On slide 38, you come up with this nice stuff, this green salt. So now you have to separate the fluorine from the green salt.
I know you're going to explain this, but just give us a sense here. How many more steps to turn this green?
One more step, and you got it.
Nuclear bomb.
One more step.
Holy cow!
So what you do is you go out. Let's look at slide 46. You go out and you get some reaction. They're called reaction vessels. They can withstand high pressures and temperatures. And what you do is you put what's called an induction coil around them. Let's look at slide 47. This is a high current induction coil. I won't go through the details. They're in the slides for those of you who are interested enough in them. And the induction coil creates an oscillating magnetic field inside it. And that oscillating magnetic field creates currents which heat the material inside the crucible. So if we look at slide 48, let's look at the lower right figure in slide 48. You can see this is a crucible with molten metal in it and an induction coil. Again, the details are in the briefing for those of you who want to take care of it in your garage. And then go to slide 51. And we have this crucible. Now the crucible is sealed. This thing is hot and it's also under high pressure. So here you have this row of 6 pictures. What you first do is you take the green salt and you mix it in with magnesium fragments. You just put magnesium in it. You just mix it, stir it together, this powder. And you start heating it. Once it starts heating, the uranium green glass starts melting. That's about 1036 degrees Celsius. Then at 1090 degrees Celsius, we're looking now at the third image from the left, the magnesium starts to vaporize. Now this stuff starts to combust. It starts reacting. You don't have to heat it at all now. It's heating itself. And it is hotter than hell. And it's well over 1100 or 12. It gets to 1500 degrees Celsius before you're finished. And if we look at the rightmost section, what happens is the uranium metal, this is a mix of materials. You have magnesium fluoride, which is relatively low density, and uranium, which is very high density. So the uranium just falls out. It just slops out at the bottom of the canister. So all you do, let's look at slide 53, is you open the canister and take out the uranium. That's the uranium there. And then there's some other steps, but I'll skip them because, what we want to do is give your audience a sense. Slide 55 shows an ingot of uranium, and if you go to slide 56, it's a not very good photograph of uranium sphere being machined on a lathe. Notice that this lathe is not in a glove box. If it were plutonium, it would have to be in a glove box. That stuff much too toxic. But you don't need a glove box for uranium. You have to be careful because you can ignite it because it does burn. All right, so now we have the uranium. So the final step. Let's go to the final step. All right, if you go to slide 58, we need a critical mass of uranium for a bomb. Turns out that 13 or 14 kilograms of 90 to 95% enriched uranium will give us a critical mass. How do we know? Let's go to slide 59. Courtesy of a typical technical book. Again, I put this out there because this is all in the open. I want people to know that, if you're a non-specialist, you don't know this, but if you're, so they can lie to you. But if you know anything, they can't lie to you. This should include, incidentally, members of the Senate or the Congress who want to know and want to ask tough questions. So I'm putting it out there for you guys in the Congress if you want this information. And if you don't want it, don't blame me. Because it's your job to know this. It's there for you to know. Incidentally, one of my colleagues at Stanford, who I used to be quite friendly with, Condi Rice, used to tell her students after she came back to Stanford after she was Secretary of State and she was accused of lying about, the claims that
weapons of mass destruction and all that.
Saddam Hussein had aluminum tubes, which he was making centrifuges out of, this device that I was talking about. She would tell the students that she just didn't know. She just didn't have anyone she could ask. Well, she could have asked me. I was a close friend of hers. She no longer talks to me, but that's fine with me because I don't want to talk with her. But she could have asked Sidney Drell. She could have asked the intelligence community. She was the Secretary of State at the time. The fact that someone like this lies this way and gets away with it infuriates me because they are responsible. If they don't know, they didn't want to know. That's the bottom line. She was just lying about it and she knew or had to know. Anyway.
Okay, so now I don't want to push you along. We're running a little bit short on time. So we got to this point now. How then do you get 10 nuclear bombs from 408 kilograms of 60% uranium?
Well, all you need is 37.5 kilograms of uranium hexafluoride to convert to metal. Divide 408 kilograms of uranium hexafluoride, you get a number like 10 or 11. That means you have enough uranium metal, if you convert it, for 10 nuclear bombs.
And so how long would it take from the decision? Say they decide
if you have
morning that they're going to do it, how long would it take before the first one is produced? And by the way, let me clarify, when you say material for a nuclear bomb, that means like the actual warhead itself,
the bomb itself. Let me just show you one more slide because this is important. This is quite important. is slide 63. This is an Encyclopedia Britannica diagram showing you a gun assembled fission weapon. In other words, this is a spherical weapon. This particular diagram does not have a big reflector, which we won't worry about for the moment, but it could easily have it. And you could simply insert, you would have a spherical weapon. You could simply insert the final pieces of uranium into it, and with a neutron initiator, which was used in the first little boy atomic bomb. That simple. And you could get 15 kiloton yield from this nuclear weapon. The amount of materials you would need to build this would weigh about 45 kilograms. So I say, well, you want to build a casing for the bomb, you want to put it in a package, you want safety mechanisms. So I say maybe it weighs twice or three times more than the actual mechanism for the bomb. So the bomb weighs 100, 150 kilograms. Well, your ballistic missiles can carry 450 kilograms to, weapon. They're now doing it routinely from Iran. So you have a nuclear delivery system too. It's already in your hands.
So once you have their version of this thing you're showing on the screen right now in 63, how technically difficult is it to get that onto and have it function properly? The
piece of cake. I mean, if you can build, well, nothing's a piece of cake, but if you have the engineering capacity to put conventional warheads on your current missiles and get them to work, you already have the capacity to mount this bomb on your system. There's nothing.
And obviously, this would be different shape and everything else from a standard high explosive warhead.
It would be easier to handle.
Right, but do you have a sense for how long it would take to manufacture that?
I think if you prepared, we don't know how much preparation they made. The first bomb might take you 10 weeks because you want to manufacture the casing and the assembly system, although you may have done that already. My own guess is they've done it already, because you don't need to be in any way under International Atomic Energy Agency review.
Used for that.
So
and so, like you said, if they've tested already up to
I'm sure you would have
87% or whatever that number was, if they've done that part, then it seems reasonable to suggest they would have
5 or
done
6
weeks
already. If they have one cascade, but it could be sooner than that. What if they have 2 cascades, 348, 350 centrifuges? There's no. I mean, I assume they have 1 cascade, but who knows how many they have.
So we have here, this is from July 4th. The IAEA pulls inspectors from Iran. So since July 4th, there hasn't been any eyes or ears on the ground. So the question is, how hard would it be physically for Iran to do this now that there's no IAEA inspectors there?
If they chose to move immediately, which they may not have done, I don't know. But if they chose to move immediately, they could potentially, if they had done enough preparation, I have to speculate about this. The alternate facility could take time to build, but my assumption is that they have built an alternate facility before anything happened, because all of this material, none of this is monitored by the IAEA. The only thing that was monitored by the IAEA was the centrifuge production. The number of centrifuges produced. But the IAEA admits that they have lost track of the centrifuge production. So if they lost track of the centrifuge production, that's the only critical item that the IAEA might have provided an insight on, and they don't have an insight to offer on that. So those centrifuges that the IAEA didn't know how to track for some reason.
Now, looking back at how the North Korean nuclear weapons program started, they did a lot of the stuff they did. They didn't have IAEA inspectors there in the beginning, but we found out about it when they conducted an underground nuclear test. Would you expect Iran to first do a nuclear test to show it, or would there just be a
I don't
bomb?
think they
What's
need
your
a
thought?
nuclear test. I don't think they need a nuclear
And why is that? Why do they not need one? This is
because a gun assembly bomb is very easy to make. What you'd make, what you could do is make a gun assembly bomb out of uranium-238, and then explosively test the mechanism for assembling it, which I'm sure is what we did with the little boy bomb. We didn't not test it. We made a little boy out of U-238 and made sure that the assembly mechanism, shoving the plug in the middle of this barrel, that it went right. U-235 is going to behave no differently from U-238. So if you know the assembly mechanism, if you know that you did the assembly mechanism correctly, then it doesn't matter. So you would not even need to test a bomb.
Well, that's a little bit concerning because the hope has kind of been that would be an alert to something that happened. But now you're saying it's completely legitimate and valid that they may say they have one, and we wouldn't have any way to know whether they did or didn't.
No,
we would have to assume they did.
We would not know.
And so if I can
we would only know if we knew that the 408 kilograms of 60% uranium was still under oversight, but we no longer have that data.
So the bottom line to all this is that as of right now, as we're speaking here, if
we're worse off than we were.
It is worse than it was before. So Iran, in their secret chambers, whatever, they can decide, all right, we're going to do that tomorrow morning, and no one would know anything about it because we don't have any eyes or ears on the ground until a declaration was made or a bomb shows up. Is that accurate?
Right.
Then that is profoundly worse than it was before. So we went from the JCPOA in 2015, 2018, which was the best condition, to then a second best, which is what we had with the IAEA still on the ground.
Right.
And then this is the worst of all circumstances.
Right.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with it.
That's not helpful.
Well, if there are any staff members who work for Congress watching this by any chance, please feel free to contact me. Certainly send me an email for the slides. And,
I know there are some, and in fact, I'm going to forward this to one that I know of for a fact that watches our show. I'm going to make sure
I sent something to Tim Kaine 2 weeks ago, and I'm familiar with how the Congress works, so I made sure that his chief of staff got a copy, and I made sure that his chief of in charge of security policy got a copy, and neither of them have even acknowledged receipt of my email. And
I don't think they understand what's at stake here. This is
I
profound.
don't understand how you could be a professional in this area and behave this way.
Come on, Ted. Look at the guy, Sean Parnell from the DOD, who made that statement, and you can't say that.
What can I tell you? What can I tell you? Look at Mark Kelly and his staff.
You can add that to the list.
Kelly.
Yeah, I laughed about it.
Emails I got from his staff. He should hate the possibility that they would be made public, which I'd be happy to do. Writing me, say, no, thanks, we're not interested in you and talking to you.
So right now, whether this goes to nuclear weapons is to be determined. We don't know that. But what we can say with a lot of confidence, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, that because of the bombing that we did on these three nuclear
facilities, they are potentially a nuclear weapon state.
But we've opened the door for it, and because the IAEA has been kicked out because of that bombing,
right? The IAEA was the only thing in between them and secretly building it. It's a pretty, it's pretty, I don't know, reckless, but you got to have a lot of courage and confidence in your security apparatus to go ahead and build those weapons. And I'm not sure they may or may not have that, but it's good enough to be only a few weeks away from it because, this is a lowball estimate. They could have 3 or 4 or 5 of these cascades working. I'm just assuming a single cascade. We don't know how many of them. If the Fordo centrifuges were not damaged, which there is a very good reason to believe there probably weren't, they have 10 cascades without the surreptitious cascades that I'm postulating. That's less than a week to enrich the uranium for a bomb. So days. So, if you have the facts in front of you, which I have presented here, and someone tells you that, and you're a member of the Congress, you have the facts to question what they're telling you. And I would like to see the members of our Congress do their jobs, because they have a fiduciary responsibility to their citizens to ask these questions. When they stand up there and say, "Oh, I don't know anything, I really want help," like Tim Kaine did, and then his staff doesn't even acknowledge receipt of information, I'm sorry. I know it's impolitic for me to do this. All my friends who are experts say, "Ted, don't say this." Well, I'm fed up. I acknowledge it. I'm fed up. If you ask me for help, you will get my polite help, 500% of my attention. But don't ignore what I'm trying to do to help you.
Especially when the stakes are
It's
as high
a
as they are.
disservice to the country. Forget about me. I'm an emeritus professor. Nobody cares about me. And they shouldn't. But you should care about what I'm telling you.
And we do, and that's why we're really grateful that you came on today, even though it's a pretty alarming situation, which we'll certainly try to expand here. And folks, listen, all the folks I see, we got a pretty good crew watching here. Listen, send this out to everybody that you can. This is something that needs to be shouted from the rooftops. This is a very serious issue here that we may have made ourselves unwittingly incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah, let these guys explain why I'm wrong. It's easy enough. They're all geniuses. They all got their intelligence community from all over. All these intelligence communities from all over congratulating them. And before anyone including the Iranians, know what happened at Fordo.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that we showed you Sean Parnell's statement about it. He claims that this is the consensus of the United States intelligence capacity. Do you think that?
I don't believe that.
You don't believe this. So you don't think that our intelligence is so misinformed or lack of knowledge that they wouldn't know what you talk to us?
I believe that Tulsi Gabbard was freaked out of her mind. I don't know this. I want to be very clear. I have no contact with her. Was freaked out of her mind when she saw this screw up, this goat rodeo beginning, because they were discussing this for a little while. She tried to alert them to this information. In fact, she was so concerned that she went out on her own and produced this video, which was a very responsible video. Instead of attacking her for producing this video, the press should compliment her for trying to do the right thing. And she got attacked for it. She got reprimanded by Trump for it. But what she was doing was trying to issue a warning, and nobody in the so-called responsible public journalist community understood what she was doing. That's how simple-minded these people are, how little concerned they are about thinking through what's actually going on around them. I'm sorry to show so much anger on a podcast, but I've had it.
Yeah, well, I can certainly understand why you could. And when you've laid it out in such detail as you have here, it's understandable, because this is some serious stuff. I mean,
what do you
it's
think
just
she was
hard
doing here?
Yeah,
trying to get public attention to herself. That's what they're saying. That's ridiculous. What she's doing here is trying to make people aware how dangerous the situation is. She's doing a public service here.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, let's pray to God we don't have those images in the black and white that are repeated today on a much larger scale. Yes. Things could go very south. But the problem is going to be that if Iran gets this, that I guess the deterrence dynamics and the relationship between states in the region will be forever altered. And we have a very, very different situation on our hand if that comes to pass.
I think so. It's altered now by perception. I mean, from Iran's point of view, the perception that they could have, I mean, they're stating very emphatically that they don't intend to build a bomb. Who knows what they're doing?
Right. But now we just have to hope that that's the case, because we have surrendered every opportunity to ensure that didn't happen because of some alleged less than perfect, going all the way back to the 2015 Obama deal, because it was allegedly not perfect. We got rid of that. And then now we have gotten rid of what was even left of it. And so now we just have to rely on their good graces not to do what you say they had the technical capacity to do.
Well, there's this old Russian statement that best is the enemy of good enough. And good enough is what we had.
We did. Yeah. Well, listen, we'll just have to keep monitoring this, and certainly let us know if you come across any other additional information or any other things that gives you any concern, and we'll pass that right along.
And I'm available, members of Congress, staff people. I'm happy to work with the staff. I don't expect to meet the Congress people. They're busy. I understand how busy they are. But I do know that the staff has a job, and I'm happy to help with it.
Yeah, and we've had your Gary's put your email address up there along with the subject line that you have requested for, and there it is again for anybody who may have missed it. And email Professor Postol. Let him know.
Yeah.
If you want that information, or if you have any other information, that would be great too. Or if you want to contact him to have him come brief somebody, for example.
Absolutely. Be happy to come down to Washington.
Yeah, and if you do, we'll get together.
Okay, absolutely. No question.
All right. Well, listen, thank you very much for this. I mean, it's very sobering, but we're unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth, even something like this, because everybody deserves to know the truth.
Thanks very much. Let's watch out that Gary doesn't release all that hydrogen fluoride onto his neighbors.
Yeah, I know. When you're going in the garage, man, I was worried he was taking a lot of notes there. So we'll have to wait and see how it works out. All righty. Thank you very much, and we'll see everybody on the next episode of Daniel Day.
Take care. Bye-bye.